Hello there again. This section focuses on access, and just to lay out a few critical things when working through this section of projects with regard to access and databasing, it's important that we lay down a few ground rules. And I've got the opening page into access started up here, and we'll get into that in just a second. But let's chat a little bit about applications in databasing. You'll find that this section is probably the most challenging of the course. It will take you the longest amount of time and probably cause you the most headache as you go through. It is slow, cumbersome, confusing, and oftentimes quite difficult in terms of the big four sections of the course that we cover. So I encourage you to take your time, work carefully through the key points in the textbook, and when you get into trouble, go backwards and find that trouble spot where you went wrong before you try and plug away and go forwards. And again, as always, should you run into challenges, stop by my office. Be glad to help you out through this section. Now, with regard to the four main topics of the course, Word, Access, PowerPoint, and Excel, access and databasing actually is probably one of the most used components of the course in terms of what you interact with on a daily basis. And what I mean by that is it's the one that you'll use the most often, even though probably when we come to applications, you'll rarely ever design your own database, but you'll interact with them often. For example, if you pull out your phone and look through your list of contacts, that's a database. When you go to the store, to the grocery store or your local retail store, and you pick up items off of the shelf and you head to the checkout line, all of those items reside in a database as the checkout person scans them at the counter and pulls up the price and calculates your bill. All of those are databases. The student records system here on MyKC is run on database. So you'll probably interact with a database as often as almost any other application that you utilize on a daily basis in this course. So I can't stress the importance of understanding how a database works more as we go through this section. And really baseline take-home messages for this particular section is I'm probably not going to teach you how to be very proficient in Access in this course, but what I want you to take away from it is how do databases work and how do I get information out of them? And really that's the key point. Most likely when you get out into industry, for at least the students in our program primarily, if you need to design a database or you need database application, you're probably going to find a program package that has what you need already in it, and the interface is already built, the structure is already there, and you simply input data and retrieve data, not really design as this course is going to take you through. So that's probably what I will encourage you to think about as a take-home message is really think about how you interact with it and understand the background of how databases are designed so that they properly spit out information. So let's get to the keys to the course, or keys to the section, excuse me. One of the prime things that is different about Access versus any of the other three programs that we'll talk about is you will start by saving and creating your file to begin with. So as I move my mouse up here onto blank desktop, which is where you will start, and click on that, you'll see I already double click too fast, and I do that for example because you'll often do the same thing, is double click too fast, and instead of creating your file format right away, which is what it asks you to do, you'll just get right in here and think that you can go back and save it later and do a save as. And Access will make you talk to yourself that way. And so let me close this out and start it again by going back. Let me pull up Access again. So I get to that blank page, and if I just click it the first time, notice then I can come here to file name, and I'll just leave it as database 2. It doesn't matter at this point for me. And you'll click create, but here is where you actually create the file name. Access doesn't like it whenever you do a save as feature like you can do in virtually every other application, which is one of the already early things that kind of gets annoying and challenging about Access. So let's go ahead and create this database, and you'll come to this page right here. And it's important to understand simple navigation. Again, the ribbon is very similar to what you will typically see in virtually every other thing, with of course different tools in it. This page in particular is what we call datasheet view. So you'll see the rows and columns set forth here in this particular section. And over here is kind of your menu of tables that, or queries or reports that you are going to end up creating. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here because it will get more confusing the longer I go, most likely. So we'll keep it very simple as to some basic keys to setting up your database. You'll toggle between the datasheet view here as you see it and design view. If you go up to the left hand corner just like I've done with my mouse and click design view, and we're going to save this table as table 1, and it will make you save things as you go, and actually Access auto saves pretty much everything. So every time that you put a record together, it's going to save that pretty much automatically. So as we go to design view here, and now essentially we're going to set up our fields that are going to be critical in our database. So let's say that we were creating a contact database of key contacts in our business. The first row here you'll see has this golden key, and this is really critical, a very key piece of understanding all databases, is that's what's called the ID field here, as they have it by default, is what we call the primary key or unique identifier. All databases must have one of those. It may be very obvious and in front basically of the database so that you clearly see it all the time, or it may be hidden and basically behind in all the databases. So if we go back to our example when we talked about early on, if you pull up that database that's in your phone, which is your contacts, the primary key is probably hidden in there. It's a unique identifier, probably a number that goes with every contact that you put in your phone. And what that does is it prevents you from creating duplicate contacts. If we go to another example for the student record system here on MyKC, all of you have a student ID number that is unique to you. And again, what that does is prevent us from creating multiple students with maybe the same last name, because we may have 42 Smiths that have been students at this institution over the years. And so we want to make sure that each one of them is unique, so we give them a student ID number. And so every database must have a unique identifier. And as you're putting together your database here, you must always have something in the unique identifier field. So that is important as we go forth. So let's go here. We'll go ahead and leave the ID as the unique identifier. You can change that to whichever one that you like. And we'll leave that as an automatically generated number. Let's go to the next field, and let's say we're going to call this one first name. And the next column is what type of data is this going to be? And if you drop down the menu option, by default it's going to say short text based upon what you put in the first field. But you have all of these options here to create from. For the most part, keep it simple and short. So I'm going to leave this one as short text. I'm going to tab over, and we're going to put in last name, and go ahead and leave that as short text. And let's throw in another one, address. I'm not doing a great job of spelling. City, state. We'll leave those as short text. And zip number is obviously going to be a number, but in this case, because we're not going to do any calculation of it, I'm going to go ahead and leave it as text. And let's say we were creating a donors list of how much money someone had donated. And so I'll give you an example here of this one might be currency, so that one would know, so it would know it's a number. Okay. So let's suggest that this is going to be our primary table. And I won't do anything down here at the bottom. Your activity is going to take you through a couple options down here at the bottom and how some of these rows, fields may look. So let's go ahead and change back to datasheet view. See it? dings at you right away. Remember, it says I must first save my table. So I went ahead and did that. And then it brings that up here back into datasheet view. So as you go through, each one of these columns is called a field, and then each row is called a record. So, for example, I'm then going to go ahead and put in a record here. And so every row then is a record. And let me show you another example here of what will not happen if I skip past. It won't let me actually even put not put anything in this column here. Now, just as I've said, if I try and delete that, it'll bang at you and say you're not allowed to do that. So every one of these columns here, every column is a field, and every record, then you'll have to put stuff in. Now, I could then leave the other fields empty if I maybe don't know these or something like that. So just to give you some examples. Now, things that's going to happen here as you go through, you have the opportunity to pull in some external data. Maybe you have some things saved in Excel, or you have, and I think your first assignment in this particular section has an Excel field that you're going to, or an Excel file that you're going to merge with this. You can merge Excel files in. You can export files from Access out to Excel. You see both of those tools here available. Also, if you go to the Create tab, then we get all kinds of reporting and query features. So how these work, the Query Wizard is a step-by-step tool that will take you through pulling information out of Excel. So let's say you wanted to search the database for all donors above $10,000. And obviously I've only put one record in here, so I can't really give you a very good example of that. But let's say that we want to query and pull out all donors that have donated $10,000 or more. We would create this, start through this Query Wizard, and it will pretty much walk you right through all the options that you have in your database in order to pull that information out. Also, you can create a form that's easier to input information. Instead of putting it in here in datasheet view, you can create a form that's more simple. If you were maybe exporting that out to a student worker, an employee or assistant of yours that maybe was going to go ahead and do the design work or do the input work for you, you can create a form to make it easier for them. And then lastly, you can create reports out of this. So I could, instead of just searching maybe donors that have given more than $10,000, I could create a whole report of donors that have donated more than $10,000, and the Report Wizard will take you through how to create those kind of things, and you'll experience all of those options as we go through this section. So as I wrap up here, I'm going to kind of leave it at that. Again, the more work that we would get into here, the more confusing it may get for you, and I want to try and keep it as simple as possible for you. So again, be slow and steady as you work through this particular section. There's a lot of places to get hung up. There's a lot of things that Access is very rigid on, and if you don't do it exactly as it tells you to, it will block you from going to the next step. So again, take those steps slowly, carefully, step by step, and walk right through it, and eventually you'll get to the point where you'll get a little faster at each particular step, and then you'll make sure you'll end up in the right place. So as we wrap up here, again, can't stress enough, if you need help, please stop by my office, come by after class, whenever it may be. Be glad to help you out. This section of Access is rather short. There's just about 3 or 4 assignments that I'd like for you to complete and get turned in on time before we move on to Excel, which will then be much, much easier to utilize. So signing off here from Access. Hopefully this recording helps you. Have a good day.